A good example of an adjustment layer capability is if you wanted to color correct your entire sequence with one color correction. That's common. Or what if you wanted to create a window burn across your entire sequence? That's another good example. So let me show you how to utilize this adjustment layer capability with those two capabilities that I just mentioned. So first of all, to create an adjustment layer, you want to navigate over here to the bottom right-hand side of your project tab and click on the new item icon. It looks like a page peel. You click on that and then you select adjustment layer. Now when you do that, you'll be prompted to make sure that this adjustment layer, which is really a container, and I'll talk about that in just a moment, but you want to make sure that it matches your sequence settings. And so more than likely they will, then you select OK. Now, of course, if they don't, then you're going to have to do a little homework and make sure that these do match, these numbers, and you can change these by typing or clicking on these down arrows. But once you've done that, you select the OK button, and then you'll notice an adjustment layer will appear in your project. Simply mouse click and drag it down to your sequence to a top layer, just like a video clip. And of course, Premiere treats it like a video clip. You can trim it, you can shorten it, you can lengthen it. In fact, I'm going to trim it and make it almost the exact duration of my sequence by clicking on the head and the tail and dragging to the left and the right. And it's basically a container. And when you take something like a time code effect or any effect, it will affect anything that it's covering from start to finish. So let's make a window burn as an example. I'll mouse click on this time code and I'll drag it into the adjustment layer, which again is just a container. And you'll see off the bat, there's my window burn. And if I drag my playhead back to the beginning, it should start at 0. Now, there are a couple of other things I want to take care of with the time code. So if I double click on this adjustment layer container, it'll load up above into the source window. Then I'll click on the Effect Controls tab, and I'll change the source track for my time code to track 1. And that should match. There we go. So now the beginning of where this adjustment layer starts will be 0. And now, of course, I can drag this to the very beginning, and then it'll be 0 at the very beginning. But this works. As I go across my movie, this window burn matches my sequence perfectly. And for this capability in the past, it was much harder to do without this adjustment layer. Now it's a piece of cake. And we all know how important a window burn is when your client wants to see the movie before they put it out there. And if they want to write a note at a particular point in time, they'll see this number and it'll match the actual movie that you made for them. So that's why window burns are so important. Well, the adjustment layer made it possible to do this across my entire sequence. So the other example that I want to talk about, in fact, I'll get rid of this effect by clicking on it up here and I'll push delete. The other example is what if I wanted to adjust some kind of or make some kind of a color adjustment to a portion of my sequence or the entire sequence. Well, I can go over to the black and white effect, or I can take any of these actually, but I'll use the black and white effect. I'll mouse click and I'll drag it into this adjustment layer. Now my entire movie is black and white. I didn't have to drop it individually into any one or go through all of them and drop it in. I put it in this adjustment layer. And again, if I want to get to the effect, I double click on the adjustment layer, I go up to the Effect Controls tab, and there's the effect. Now, there are many effects that have more adjustment capabilities than this one, but this one's pretty straightforward. And you can see that any change I make up here would affect this adjustment layer, which would enhance or affect anything below it. Okay, so what if I wanted to maybe go from color up into black and white, which is where this adjustment layer begins here. And then in fact, if I drag this and I'll make it end mid-clip, this is another good example, I can add a transition to this. Well, I may not want to add the traditional type of transition that you're thinking of. I'm going to keyframe this. So I'll mouse click and I'll extend the height of this particular track, right? And I'll get my pin tool. And I'll mouse click, let's try that again, and drag that down. So now my movie will go from color, it'll go up into black and white. How cool is that? In fact, I'll drag this I'll drag this keyframe over so that it goes from color to black and white within that same, wow, that's cool, within that same video clip. And then I'll do the same to the end over here. I'll go from black and white to color by using my pin tool. Again, this is the opacity that I'm adjusting. And so now my playhead, as it goes from black and white, will go to color right in the middle of that clip. So that's another good example of why you'd want to use an adjustment layer. There are many, but those are two good examples. And you can have so many capabilities by putting different effects in here or stacking several effects within the adjustment layer. That's why this is so handy. It's basically a container that sits above everything else in your sequence and will affect anything underneath it. So there you go. That's how adjustment layers work. And when you're ready, you can move on to the next lesson.